I wonder how long will it take before these situations stop? Are they pitiful or undeserving of help? Do these dogs feel the weight of suffering or the sting of human neglect? Follow the story in Pets in Love to learn more. It was a day like no other when Nichol, a longtime volunteer with Beauties and Beasts, received the distress call. A dog was in desperate need of help. A dog left chained, starving and suffering in the unforgiving heat of a backyard. The story of Chevelle would soon become a testament to the power of love, compassion, and the relentless fight for survival. When Nichol arrived at the scene, what she saw was heartbreaking. A frail, emaciated dog with a chain tightly wrapped around his neck, anchored by a cemented 5-gallon bucket. The poor creature was unable to move, unable to escape. His body, nothing but skin and bones, seemed lifeless, his eyes showing about to give up. He was chained. He didn't have access to water, she said. The immediate need was to get him out of that place, and fast. The volunteers transported Chevelle to the nearest urgent pet care center, where the extent of his injuries and suffering began to unfold. His condition was worse than anyone had expected. Not only was he severely underweight, but it was discovered that a large portion of his tongue was missing, surgically severed, and likely the result of prolonged trauma. His wounds were not only physical, but deeply emotional, each injury a testament to the cruelty he had endured. Chevelle was rushed to an urgent care clinic, where Dr. Brenda began the arduous task of assessing his condition. The initial shock was overwhelming. I've seen emaciation to this level, but nothing like this. The trauma that caused his severe injuries, his tongue severed and much of his chest and body covered in necrotic tissue, was unfathomable. He had been left to slowly die, suffering from wounds no animal should endure. After receiving emergency care at the urgent pet clinic, Chevelle's condition was even worse than imagined. His wounds were infected, and the infection was spreading rapidly, threatening to overtake his fragile body. He had been trapped in a cycle of suffering for weeks, possibly even longer, without help. But Chevelle wasn't ready to give up. "He's rotting," Dr. Brenda said softly, her voice heavy with emotion. They warned Nichol and the team that Chevelle's chance of survival was slim, but Nichol refused to give up on him. "As long as they keep fighting, we'll keep fighting with them," she said. She made him a promise that day. A promise that if he fought through this, if he pulled through this unimaginable suffering, he would have a forever home. He would never face another moment of pain or neglect again. Round-the-clock care began immediately. Chevelle was placed on IV fluids to combat dehydration and antibiotics to fight the infections ravaging his body. His wounds were cleaned and dressed, but as days turned into weeks, progress was slow. Nichol visited daily, sitting by his side, whispering encouragement. She brought him soft blankets, his favorite toys, and even soothing music to ease his stress. Chevelle's story quickly spread online, and support poured in from across the country. Donations, prayers, and messages of encouragement flooded in. One package from Michigan contained a plush toy with a note, "For Chevelle when he comes home." Nichol clung to the hope that Chevelle would indeed come home one day. As much as Nichol hoped for a quick turnaround, Chevelle's condition only worsened in the weeks after his rescue. The infection gripping his frail body spread like wildfire, defying every treatment and threatening to snuff out the flicker of life still burning in him. His wounds, once localized, grew larger, revealing raw, necrotic tissue that no amount of antibiotics seemed able to stop. Nichol felt powerless watching him suffer, her heart breaking a little more each time his soft whimper reached her ears. She hated that his life had been nothing but pain for so long. And now, even with everything she and the team were doing, the odds seemed stacked against him. But giving up wasn't an option. Not for Chevelle, not for the promise she'd made him. When the veterinary team at Urgent Care suggested transferring him to Kansas State University for advanced treatment, Nichol didn't hesitate. If there was a chance, no matter how slim, that someone could help him, she would take it. The first time Nichol walked into the ICU at Kansas State, she was struck by the gravity of Chevelle's condition. Machines beeped steadily, Tubes snaked around his small, battered body, and the smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air. Dr. Brenda met her with a compassionate but serious expression, walking her through the uphill battle they were about to face. "We're doing everything we can," Dr. Brenda assured her, though her eyes carried the weight of uncertainty. Nichol stood by Chevelle's kennel, watching his shallow breaths and the subtle twitch of his tail when he sensed her nearby. "You hang in there, okay?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere. We're going to get through this." The team worked tirelessly, cleaning his wounds and applying honey bandages to fight the infection. Every day brought a new procedure, a new attempt to save him. Nichol spent hours at the clinic, her hands gripping the edges of his kennel as she willed him to fight. But each night, as she drove home, the weight of helplessness pressed down on her. She cried for him, for the pain he'd endured, and for the uncertainty of his future. Weeks later, when the infection showed signs of receding, Nichol allowed herself a glimmer of hope. But it was clear that Chevelle's body needed more than they could provide at Kansas State. His wounds were still too severe, his recovery too fragile. When the suggestion came to transfer him to Colorado State University for state-of-the-art care, Nichol agreed, though the thought of another move terrified her. The drive to Colorado was quiet, except for Nichol's soft reassurances. "You're going to be okay, Chev," she murmured as she glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He lay on a bed of blankets, his body still weak, but his eyes open, watching her as if he understood. "This is just another step. We've got this." At CSU, a new team of specialists greeted them, each bringing expertise and hope to the fight. Chevelle's wounds were reassessed, and the care plan grew more intricate. Skin grafts were scheduled, and his diet was overhauled to include custom meals packed with nutrients. Physical therapists introduced gentle stretches to keep his muscles from atrophying. Nichol watched every session, her heart swelling with pride and aching with worry. She saw how hard he worked, how much he wanted to get better. His small victories, lifting his head, taking a sip of water, became the highlight of her days. But the setbacks were crushing, each one a reminder of how precarious his condition remained. Through it all, Nichol never wavered. She stayed near the hospital, often sleeping in her car to save money for his care. She brought him his favorite blanket, toys from supporters, and soft words of encouragement. When he was too weak to move, she sat beside him, stroking his ears and whispering promises of better days. But the toll on her was undeniable. She felt the strain of sleepless nights, the ache of worrying whether each goodbye might be the last. Yet every time she saw him, saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes, or the faint wag of his tail, she found her strength again. "You're not done, Chevelle," she would say softly, brushing away tears. "You've come too far to stop now." On a crisp November morning, the world seemed a little brighter for Chevelle. After weeks of anguish, worry, and uncertainty, Nichol walked into the treatment room to find him standing, albeit shakily, on his own four legs. His wagging tail, though weak and hesitant, was like a beacon of hope. She froze for a moment, overcome by emotion, before dropping to her knees and whispering through tears, "You did it, buddy. You're fighting." It wasn't just the physical act of standing that brought tears to Nichol's eyes. It was what it symbolized: resilience, determination, and a refusal to give up. For the first time, the infection showed signs of retreat. His wounds, once angry and festering, began to knit together. Chevelle's body was healing, but his spirit had always been intact, unwavering in its quiet strength. Though the damage to his tongue was irreversible, Chevelle adapted with remarkable ingenuity. With the help of the veterinary team, Nichol introduced him to new ways of drinking and eating, ensuring he received the nourishment he needed to continue his recovery. Each small triumph, an eager lap of water, a careful nibble at food, felt like a celebration. By early December, the moment Nichol had been waiting for finally arrived. Chevelle was discharged from the hospital, strong enough to leave behind the sterile walls and constant monitoring. As Nichol led him to her car, his tail thumped against the seat. The moment he climbed in, as if he instinctively knew he was going home. Not just to a house, but to a life he had never dreamed of. True to her promise, Nichol opened her door and her heart to Chevelle. For the first time in his life, he experienced the warmth of a loving home. He had his own plush bed, positioned in a sunny corner where he could rest peacefully. The yard, fenced and secure, became his playground. A stark contrast to the chain and dirt patch he once called home. Nichol watched as Chevelle explored his new surroundings, sniffing every corner with curiosity and wonder. The scars that marred his body served as a reminder of his journey, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they became symbols of his strength and the compassion of those who had refused to let him fall through the cracks. As Chevelle regained his strength, his story began to ripple beyond the walls of Nichol's home. He became an ambassador for dogs like him, chained, abandoned, and abused, but not forgotten. At events and fundraisers, his gentle presence captivated everyone he met. People would bend down to stroke his fur, moved by his calm demeanor and soulful eyes. As the months passed, Chevelle grew stronger, happier, and more playful. But the best part of his transformation, Nichol believed, wasn't just his recovery. It was the profound way he touched every life he encountered, hers most of all. Each night, as Chevelle lay curled up at her feet, Nichol whispered the same words she had spoken on the day she rescued him. "You're home now. Forever." And Chevelle, with his wagging tail and steady gaze, seemed to understand. That's the end of the story today. What do you think of his transformation from the brink of death to a happy, thriving dog? Have you ever helped an animal in need, or do you have a story of your own rescue experience? We'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, Pets in Love, for more incredible rescue stories that highlight the power of kindness and the life-changing impact of a second chance. Thank you for joining us today. See you in the next video.